other attribute they have, and there's always a little bit of a negative connotation of being in the AM session. So normally the waving competition is to get into the pro session. So I know Optimum, I know Ollie and Lewis well, and it's Lewis's first GT3 race, so that one would have been a little bit easier. But when they are so equally matched, the teams will come up with a strategy of maybe doing something different to what they think the other guys are going to do. So yeah, it's a never easy one, and there sometimes isn't that much logic put into it, unfortunately.
Well, in GT4, it is looking equally as close as in GT3. We don't have the same numbers of cars in GT4, but it's still a competitive grid, and a few more familiar names in familiar places down there as well. TF Sport, the reigning GT3 and GT4 champions, they are back in force again, but they do have different driver lineups. They've got one car that's being driven by Jamie Caroline and Daniel Vaughan. The other one, though, Conor O'Brien and Patrick Kibble, and that is the car that took pole position in yesterday's first qualifying session. And I believe Patrick Kibble, the youngest driver on the grid this year, is down there with Kelvin.
Patrick, the youngest driver on the grid, I've just been told, in the Aston Martin. I was in this car last year, so I know just how good it is. Great qualifying session yesterday for you guys.
Yeah, Connor did a fantastic lap in the first qualifying session. Yeah, so we're starting on pole. Hopefully we get away to a clean start. Connor, I can trust in Connor, he's done last year, so definitely looking forward to it.
And you obviously got the new Toyota to your left. How are you feeling about that car? Is that a big threat for you guys? Obviously they've qualified second here, and it's looking pretty good. Yeah,
it's been looking fast over the past 2 days in testing, so I think we've got to look out for them, but hopefully we can stay in front and keep them behind us.
We'll have a great race, mate.
Cheers, mate, thank you.
Time for Kelvin to move, I think, pretty quickly, because the grid is emptying very rapidly, and that is with good reason, because we're about to go racing in the 2020 Intelligent Money British GT Championship around Oulton Park. The cars looking absolutely splendid out there in the summer sunshine that we do now have. There was a bit of cloud cover that was creeping in earlier on. Now the sun comes out, though. That means that not only do the cars look good, Joe, but the temperature is starting to climb inside and outside of the cars. And in both of those ways, that makes life harder for the drivers. It's hot in the car and it's hot out of the car, which doesn't do the tyres any good.
No, definitely. In the cockpit, normally looking at 20 to 25 degrees hotter than ambient. So we're probably looking at 45 to 50 degrees in there. So it's like sitting in a mobile sauna while trying to work out how to get further up the grid. So that's always interesting. And yeah, good point about the tyres. The hotter they get, the less grip they actually generate. So the tyre wants to be in an operating window of about 90 to 100 degrees. But as ambient and track temperature then goes up, you kind of go over a bit of a precipice at 100 degrees, and suddenly the grip levels really drop. Pirelli have actually produced a new tyre for GT3 this year, and it's actually a lot faster than last year. I won't go into the boring details of it, but Pirelli have done a really great job of making that tyre even faster for the GT3 cars.
Well, those GT3 cars are pulling away from the line now onto their green flag lap, the first one of the season. The nerves will be starting to rise. Here is how they're lined up then. It's those four McLarens at the front. Optimum Motorsport's Lewis Proctor gets pole position by 1,000th of a second over Jordan Witt for 2C's Motorsport. His teammate Angus Fender is third, with James Baldwin, the world's fastest gamer, in fourth on the grid for Jenson Team Rocket RJN. Then it's Sam Dahan and Rob Collard, legendary driver of the British Touring Car Championship, switching to GTs for 2020. Mercedes and Lamborghini then on the third row of the grid. Then we've got Ian Loggy in the Pro-Am Ram Racing Mercedes, and then the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes of Richard Neary that he's sharing this year with his 18-year-old son, Sam, and they're both very quick drivers indeed. Adam Ballon, so near yet so far to the championship last year. He's got Phil Keane sharing that car again for Barwell. They're ninth on the grid, ahead of the Ferrari making a welcome return. AF Corsa UK's Duncan Cameron starts the car that Liam Griffin will take over at the pit stops. Outside of the top 10, then we have Michael Igoe for WPI Motorsport. That car, I would say, is out of position, so watch for them to move forward. Nick Jones in the Team Parker Racing Bentley is 12th on the grid, and then towards the back of the GT3 field in 13th position on the grid, we should have the JMH Auto Lamborghini of John Seal ahead of Conor O'Brien in the number 95 TF Sport Aston Martin that is on pole position in GT4. We're watching that car from on board with Sam Smelt in the Speedworks Motorsport Toyota. He starts second in GT4 alongside Patrick Mathieson for HHC Motorsport. Three different manufacturers in the top three positions. Then it's the second TF Aston of Daniel Vaughan. Ford, ahead of Jordan Albert for Academy Motorsport in the only Ford Mustang GT4 in the championship this year. Chris Westmail makes the transition from sports prototypes to GTs. He's with HHC Motorsport's McLaren programme alongside Ben Hurst in the first of the two Century Motorsport BMWs, then Mia Fluid for Baldwin Motorsport in a McLaren, and David Whitmore in the second of those Century Motorsport BMWs, that the one running with the Tagiwa sponsorship this weekend. And then the field makes its way through, because that is the last row of the grid. Tension really starting to build now then, ahead of 60 minutes of racing action, a mandatory pit stop and driver change in the middle. We'll get into that in a bit more detail later on. And no pit stop penalties. This is the one race of the year where there are no success penalties, of course, because it's the first race of the year. This then, the one that sets the tone for the season to come. Out of Lodge Corner we go then, up and over Deer Leap. It's been a long wait, but the 2020 Intelligent Money British GT Championship is go! The lights go out, the run towards Old Hall Corner begins, and it's the Optimum Motorsport McLaren on the left-hand side of the road that holds on to pole position, slotting into second place. From the outside of row one goes Jordan Witt, so it's grid order for the top two or three. Some side-by-side action behind. Let's hope they all get through safely. Yes, they do. They make their way down the hill then, into Cascade. Still, it is Angus Fender and James Baldwin third and fourth. Look at how careful they're being, slightly cold tyres, and no one wants to bin the car halfway around the first lap of the season, and they're all very much minding their P's and Q's for the time being. Down the Lakeside Straight we go. GT4, it looks as though that is still much the same as it was, although a slowish start there for John Seal in the GT3 Lamborghini has actually put him behind the GT4 leader. That's playing nicely into the hands of Conor O'Brien in that Aston Martin. Well, Joe, clean start, that's the first thing on the checklist. Everyone being pretty careful, and we've kept that grid formation for the four McLarens at the front.
Yeah, exactly. I think you've called it right. Everyone wanted to keep clean. It's been such a long off-season. I think everyone's been going through in their head how they wanted the start to go, and it all kind of went like that. No one was trying to be a hero, although a little boring. I think that will lead for a better race. You did call it right as well. I think that Mike Ligo will be on the front foot going forward. I believe that car had a suspension issue in qualifying, so I think he's probably going to be our mover and shaker in the GT3 grid. And what a phenomenal job by Conor O'Brien to overtake a GT3 car. I've never actually seen that before, and as we see that, so Conor's actually now got a huge gap to second place, so he needs how to deal with how John Seal overtakes him to not lose too much time. And he is absolutely laughing in that GT4. He probably already has a 2-second gap, so that'll be interesting to see how that sort of transforms that battle.
First lap then is in the books, and Lewis Proctor leads the way for Optimum Motorsport by just under 0.7 of a second from Jordan Witt in second. There is Nick Jones in the Team Park Racing Bentley Continental GT3. He's down in 11th place with Mike Ligo right behind him. That Lamborghini looked really strong yesterday. Shame they had that problem in qualifying that put them down the grid, but as Joe was saying, they should make progress. We've seen the change there between John Seal and our GT4 leader Conor O'Brien. Sam Smelt is still second, and it's still third for Patrick Matthiessen. So grid order in GT4. Then, though, the first of the changes, the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang being started in this race by Jordan Albert, has got himself up ahead of the second of the TF Sport Aston Martins. The Ford Mustang, which went well here last year, remember, in the hands of the Multimatic squad, going well again for Academy Motorsport in 2020. GT3 field then starting to make its way over Hilltop again, and this is when we start to see now, Joe, this fascinating dynamic between the Silver Cup entrants and the Pro-Am cars. It's crucial for those Silver Cup McLarens, particularly at the front of the field, to build a gap now, because in theory, through the second half of the race, that gap might get eroded by the pros.
Yeah, exactly. They need to build the foundation for the race result in this one now, so whatever gap they can hand over to their teammate who will be up against the pros in those Pro-Am element cars is so beneficial. And interestingly, the sort of crossover of that Silver to Pro-Am is here with the first lot of the Mercedes, and they are also teammates. So you've got Dehan in front of Loggy, who is then in front of Neary. And interestingly, Neary is actually running the old spec Mercedes, so it's not the Evo. So for you anoraks out there, you'll be able to spot the difference on the front grille. It doesn't have the facelift on it. And then to add a bit of spice to that, Neary and Loggy have some good history round here from a few years back, and it's not a friendly history to say the least. So that Mercedes battle could get pretty interesting as well. We saw Nick Jones there just running a little bit wide out of Old Hall. You can see the concrete on the exit of the corners in a few of the parts of the track, and it looks strange that the cars aren't using it, because it looks very tempting and it would be faster, but under MSA law that would be illegal. So as soon as any tyre leaves the circuit or the curb, that is track limits. So they basically got 3 attempts, and then it's drive-through time. So there we see Igo on Jones at Shell. It's probably the best overtaking spot in a GT3 car, as it's one of the highest speeds to the lowest speed, so the brake zone's the biggest, so you've got the longest time to get the overtake done in essence.
Yeah, and that was an overtake for 11th place then. Igo is moving forward. His next target will be Duncan Cameron in the AF Corsa UK Ferrari, and there is the number 51 car. Great to see that car back in the championship. Had a bit of a spin in one of the practice sessions down at Cascades yesterday, but generally a pretty solid weekend for them. They're running down in 10th place now, and we ride on board with Duncan Cameron as he crests the hill past the water tower and into Drew. It's a real roller coaster part of the circuit, this, Joe, and full commitment required through that double apex right-hander.
Yeah, as you see, it's a 90-degree right, Druids, and it's an infamous corner, but it's still taken in 4th gear. So to give you an idea of speed, that'll be 110, 120 miles an hour. And you can see why the cars are so fast with the big wing on the back, slick tyres, so they're able to carry that speed. And that is the nature of this circuit. It is all very fast and flowing, and then they bang 2 chicanes in it to make it interesting. So as we cut back to the GT4s, we still see Conor O'Brien in the lead. It'll be interesting to see the gap he's got behind him, but as we said earlier, his job is to get that car as far away from his competitors, so when Kibble gets in, hopefully he can convert that into a win.
There is the second of those TF Sport Aston Martins, and they're just behind Christopher Wesmail there in the second HHC McLaren, already being warned for exceeding track limits at Old Hall Corner. So, interestingly, is Mick Jones in the GT3 Bentley. So, it's pretty early in the stint. We're only on lap 4 of the race now. These drivers are going to be in the cars for near enough half an hour. You don't want to be being warned about track limits this early on, because they're going to have to really watch out for that now through the rest of the stint. Thiessen there running in 3rd place in GT4, and then just in front of him the Toyota from Speedworks, which is having a brilliant debut in the championship. Sam Smelt has started the car. I'll hand over to James Kell, who's been doing a lot of sort of club level racing in Mazdas in the past, raced in Ginettas last year actually, which was a bit of a step up to sort of GT4 like machinery. But those two drivers have a real task on their hands this year. Not only are they trying to compete for a championship, but they're doing so whilst developing a brand new car, and so far, Joe, it's bang on the pace.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know too much about the Toyota, but just looking at it proportion wise, it looks right. And there definitely is an old adage in motorsport: if it looks right, it goes right. And it would seem like that Toyota is sticking by the rule, and yeah, hopefully the reliability's there, and they can just get better as the season progresses. And it's great for us at British GT to have another car in the mix to spice it up even more. But yeah, it looks brilliant. It looks so good over the curbs as well. Maybe ride height looks slightly higher than a normal race car. Maybe it inherits a bit more from the road car, but then the positive of that is he can use the curbs more because he's higher, and it won't bottom out and it won't do any damage to the underfloor basically of the car.
Yeah, I noticed that yesterday watching trackside, and you can see what Joe talks about. The distance between the ground and the bottom of that front splitter is quite a lot more than the other cars, but it doesn't seem to affect its stability through high-speed corners. It really is planted, and it's no real surprise, therefore, to see it on the pace already. Back to GT3, good fight developing here for 3rd position. Angus Fender in the second of the 2 blue and black 2Cs Motorsports McLarens has James Baldwin in the Jenson Team Rocket RJN example right on his case. There's Michael Igo, who, having got past Nick Jones, hadn't really raced away from him actually. He's still 2.1 seconds behind Duncan Cameron in the Ferrari. So the best of the battling then is going on in front, and half a lap or so ago, I did think that Rob Collard maybe was getting into this this scrap as well, in 5th position in the black and white Lamborghini run from Baldwin Motorsport, just a different colour scheme for that car this year. And there is Rob, the tin top racing star, who has been racing in touring cars longer than I've been alive, Joe, and he's been racing for a while before that, even a very talented driver. But that doesn't mean that it's a given that he'll be on the pace in GT racing. It's a completely different thing altogether. Yeah,
definitely. Obviously, touring cars, predominantly front-wheel drive, although most of his stint was in a BMW, so at least the rear-wheel drive element will feel familiar. But he was pretty infamous, as we see Fender running wide there, kicking up the dust. So again, that's a track limit sort of infringement there. But yeah, back to Rob. He was kind of infamous in the touring car packages as being the enforcer, which is all very well in a taxi-like car where the bumpers cost 300 quid. But But a bumper's like 5.5, 6 grand. He'll probably be thinking a bit different of how and when he hits people. But I think he's done brilliant to convert himself from a tin top star to a carbon top star so quickly. And I think as the season goes on, he's only going to be closer and closer to the front. And yeah, I think you're right. I think this will be the battle. It looks like Fender's maybe struggling a little bit. We saw him run wide at Cascade, so maybe the rear of the car's not quite as happy. And James Baldwin, the world's fastest gamer, is right on Fender's fender, so it'll be good to see where it goes.
I've been impressed with James's pace this weekend, but that's one thing, being able to go out there in a practice or qualifying session and bang in a quick lap, but it's his racecraft that I think is really going to come under some scrutiny, just because no one really knows how he's going to race. We keep calling him the world's fastest gamer, that's because he is a very, very strong sim racer, and sim racing, of course, over the last few months has gained an even higher profile. But how well he can translate that into real-world racecraft and real-world pace over a race stint awaits to be seen. Back to the GT4 battling now, and this is tightening up quite nicely. This is the fight for third place with Patrick Matisse and Jordan Albert and the number 97 Aston Martin of Daniel Vaughan getting themselves closer together. GT4 cars, of course, running with a little bit less downforce, slightly less aerodynamic aids on the car, a smaller front splitter, smaller rear wing. Does that allow them to run a bit closer together than we're seeing for the GT3 cars, Joe? Yeah,
definitely. In a GT3 car, any corner faster than third gear and above, you are in the aerodynamic wake that we hear so much and get bored about so much in Formula One, but it is a real thing. And GT4, as you allude to, the downforce figures are nearly half that of GT3, so by that logic, you're easily twice as close without getting affected. As we see the Mustang super strong on the brakes and really starting to hustle that little McLaren. It's a great advertisement of why we have balance of performance, because if you plonk those two cars on a racetrack, I would have thought the McLaren would have the Mustang all day long, but the McLaren is only running about 450 horsepower, whereas it could be 570, obviously, and weight-wise it is carrying 100 kilos more, and the Mustang gets around the outside, and it's a long way round there, but the camber of Cascades does allow you to carry speed. The next corner is a left-hander. This has given the TF Aston a run, so if he wants to, he could make it 3 wide, but it's not really 3 wide in terms of real estate there. And there we see quite a typical motorsport thing. It looked like Albert was on the front foot and was going to get in the front of that pack, but actually now he's been shuffled all the way back, so he's going to have to regroup and maybe use the Aston Martin to follow his way through on that McLaren in front. So
back into 4th place now then for Daniel Vaughan ahead of Jordan Albert, and yeah, as Joe was saying, it looked as though the Mustang was going to gain a position there. In the end, it ends up losing one and dropped back down into 5th position. Over hilltop they come then. This is the 7th lap of the race for the GT4s, and Jordan Albert already starting to think about getting this place back. Thinks he's already overtaken this Aston Martin once, so how hard can it be to do it again? But the Aston Martin seems to be coming on stronger now as the stint goes on. The other Aston Martin started off strongly and is continuing to stretch the gap. Look how far ahead Conor O'Brien is now, the Toyota of Sam Smelt. Patrick Matisse is getting away from these two as well now, because they're delaying each other, with Daniel Vaughan driving more and more defensively to keep that big Mustang at bay. And as soon as he starts defending, it slows them both down and allows the McLaren to pull away. So 3 different makes of cars, all designed completely differently as well. They all look different, they all sound different. This is why we love GT racing. It's not just the GT3 cars that attract the crowds to events like this. It is the GT4 category as well, and you can see why. The racing is close, the cars are still very quick, they still look and sound the part, and this battle, I think, is going to continue to rage for a while. More track limits penalties, by the way. Number 58 is now being warned, which is Patrick Matisse, and so in his hurry to get away from these two before anything goes wrong, he's exceeded track limits somewhere. And again, early in the stint relatively, we're still not even halfway through this first stint of the race, and it's quite early to be given a track limits warning even.
Yeah, I think the other McLaren making a bit of a getaway, going unnoticed because it's doing it so boringly and serenely, is Lewis Proctor in the lead of the race overall. The gap's now 2.8 to Jordan Witt, so that's a pretty sizable gap, and it's the second largest gap in the GT3 field, so that really is going to make Wilkinson's job that little bit easier once he comes up against the pros. So here we see Proctor going through Island Bend, lovely corner, then on the hard brakes into Shell, and then we will see Witt there. So 2.8 seconds doesn't sound much in day-to-day life, but on a racetrack it is an absolute eternity.
Not that I want to disagree with you often, but the gap actually came down on the last lap, just to prove you wrong. It was only by a tenth or so, but Witt's taken another tenth out of him actually in the first sector of this lap. Now, they're only on lap 9. Surely this can't be tyre wear already. They're both the same weight, they're both the same car, obviously. They're both silver cars as well. So could that be maybe a driving style thing? Has Lewis hurt the tyres by scampering off into the distance and now he's starting to pay the price?
Yeah, possibly. And the car also transforms over the stint. Not physically like a transformer, unfortunately, but just in terms of how it burns the fuel off, the weight coming off the car, changes the balance of it, the feel of it, the tyre pressures, the tyre life that you alluded to, all changes. So each lap you're kind of dealing with an evolving object in the car and you're trying to extract the most from it. So you go into the corner with the best intentions and maybe going a little bit fast and that hurts you. So you're always trying to work out, and that's why we get this natural ebb and flow in a race of cars looking strong and then 10 minutes later they've lost their weakness. And I think that's what we're seeing here with Mathiasen in the McLaren. He's in this sort of no man's land, middle of stint time, trying to burn off a bit more fuel, and then the car will come back to life most probably with that McLaren. It does carry so much weight in the balance of performance to slow it down that it does sometimes hurt itself a little bit in the middle of its stint.
Well, that gap between the McLaren and the Aston Martin that we're watching here, between Patrick Mathiasen and Daniel Vaughan, was up near a 3/4 of a second a couple of laps ago. It's down to about 3/4 of a McLaren length now, because the Aston Martin is starting to apply the pressure. Didn't get such a good exit from the British chicane though, and now he has to turn from attack to defence, because Jordan Albert did get a good exit and he's now starting to clamber all over the rear bumper of the bright yellow number 97 machine, almost pushing it actually through Nickelbrook Corner. Thus the gap opens out again between Mathiasen and Vaughan. So a fascinating little three-way scrap this for third position in the GT4 category. McLaren, Aston Martin and Ford Mustang. And the Mustang does appear to have certain parts of the track where it's strong and other parts of the track where maybe the Aston Martin gets away. But I do think that the Aston Martin may be the quicker of these three, just can't quite get the track position that it needs. And then, look, not far behind them now on track, the race leader Lewis Proctor. So now we start moving into the next phase of the race. The tyres are going away, the fuel's burning off, and now you've got traffic to deal with.
Yeah, exactly, and that's going to get really interesting. We're probably looking at a lap and a half until he hits the GT4 traffic, and then he's got to make the decision of where and how he overtakes. And the emphasis is completely on, we see in the mid-pack, Mia Fluid getting overtaken by the GT3 cars, and that was a nice overtake for them because it's all in a straight line, and that's as good as it gets. But the onus is completely on the GT3 car to overtake the GT4. It's not for the GT4 car to get out of the way of the GT3. So by that sort of measure, the pressure is on you as the GT3 driver to do everything correctly and not lose any time yourself.
The worst thing in a way that a GT4 car could do is start pulling off line, because that's unpredictable. You don't know where it's going to go. So all of the GT3 drivers I've spoken to have said they'd much rather they stick to the racing line. Okay, they might get in the way, but at least we know where they're going. And you'd rather lose half a second or a second through a corner than run into them and both end up off the road.
Yeah, definitely. Like when you're on the motorway and you come up behind some old grandma doing 60 in the fast lane, it's better to just go past her as quickly as you can without disrupting her and losing her contact lenses and crushing in the barrier. So you do try and pick your way through and just spot your opportunity. So hopefully the BMW stays obvious left, and that gives Lewis the right-hand side. It will be tight but easy flat still. And it does look tight, and now he's onto a McLaren GT4, so brand on brand action here. 570 GT4 versus 720S GT3, and this will be a nice one. He'll stay left, he'll go right, and he may even be able to get back to the left-hand side for the brake zone into Lodge and not lose any lap time at all there. So they were two relatively easy ones, maybe half a tenth to a tenth of a second lost with him having to go a further distance, but in terms of actual speed, not too much difference. But then we see in front of him 3 GT4s all clustered together. So then you've got the mindset of, well, they're all looking forward, worrying about their own lives. Will they even see me? So we go on board. Some nice McLaren Sparco branded boots there. We've just been given all our new stuff for the season, which is the best day of the year. Right foot on the accelerator, fairly obvious, but the left foot on the brake. And in a race car, this is fairly normal, but it just stays the crossover time from right foot going over to the brake and gives you a little bit more control. There still is a clutch pedal, but that's only needed to stop and pull away. You can see, oh look, fairly smooth down there, nothing too untoward. Brake pressure is relatively high, about 100 bars, so that's kind of stamping your foot in a big one. So he's going to get a little bit stuck here on the exit. He'll sweep further right to maybe cut back to the left, but the Aston's they've done brilliant. Both GT4 cars have made their intentions clear. As you said, that's all that the GT3 drivers want. There's no beige there, it's black, white. I'm staying left, I'm staying right, and then you can pick your way through. Looks like Fender probably caught him a bit on the first part of the lap, but now he's leaking time out that second chicane. And then McLaren in front wants a bit of racing line, so it's not making it as clear, but he's going to get through cleanly at least. But then we will see this gap now. It was pretty steady, a tenth or so either way, suddenly going half a second, 7/10 one way or the other, depending how they hit traffic. And this won't be the only time they meet traffic. Obviously, we've met them a third of the way through, so logic dictates we should see them 3 times, but then with the pit stops all happening at different times themselves, it can happen 4 or 5 times in a 1-hour race.
Well, the lead gap came down by 1.3 seconds last time. It's come down by another 3.5 or so this time, so it is a net loss that for Lewis Proctor. Jordan Witt is a lot closer now than he was before, but we'll see whether he can do anything with that now. They've been running around at more or less the same pace. Now he's a bit closer. Might he have that incentive to push on a bit more? Well, we'll find out momentarily, I suppose. On board now with the Ram Racing Mercedes of Sam Dahan, running down in 6th position. We have 6 Silver Cup entrants in GT3. They're all running in the top 6. So right now, Sam Dahan is kind of in the hot seat, isn't he? Because he is the first of the silver cars in front of the Pro-Am machines, and so once he hands over to Patrick Kuyala in the second stint, he could become the first of the silver drivers that then comes under attack from the pro drivers behind. That's the dynamic of this race. The Silver Cup drivers and teams have the edge in this first half of the race because they're up against AM drivers, bronze graded drivers, but then that switches in the second half. Sam Dahan almost into the back of the TF Sport Aston Martin there, and you can see here he's not having quite such an easy time getting through the GT4 traffic. Dives up the inside, that means he's offline into Hislops. Didn't really know where the McLaren had gone, so he delayed the turn in to the left-hand part of Hislops as well, and then gets a boot full of opposite lock coming out of Knickerbrook just for good measure as well. So Sam Dahan there picking his way through. Easy though, isn't it, sometimes for a driver, particularly a less experienced driver. Sam Dahan has experience these days, but you know, some of the drivers out there could get distracted by this traffic, and it's easy if you end up offline passing one of them to then make another mistake because you haven't quite caught up from being offline in the first place. Yeah,
so obviously your line's different, but you could be picking up a bit of marbles, a bit of tyre debris, which obviously loses your grip straight away, so there's then a double negative. And then racing drivers, being quite thick animals, have a weird mentality of when they lose time, they feel like they need to get that time back straight away at the next corner. And obviously you're going as fast as you can anyway, so to try and get extra time back normally ends up badly, and you overdrive the corner and lose even more time. So suddenly you've got a triple negative of one problem of overtaking the GT4 car, and before you know it, your whole world's unravelled and you just want to go home.
Well, we've got, I don't want to go home, I'm enjoying this. We've got GT3 cars overtaking GT4s, GT4s overtaking other GT4s as well, because for the third time in this race, the Academy Motorsport Mustang and the second TF Sport Aston Martin have swapped positions, and so back through into fourth place goes Jordan Albert, ahead of Daniel Vaughan. Nose to tail now, though, for the race lead. Look at this, I don't know whether traffic came into play, but the 2Cs Motorsport McLaren of Jordan Witt is right underneath the rear wing of the Optimum Motorsport McLaren of Lewis Proctor. Game on now then, 38 minutes near enough still to go. We're still just under 10 minutes away from the pit lane window opening, and we have the top 2 cars in GT3 absolutely together, Proctor to Witt. So Witt, he's gained that big chunk of time in the traffic, and that now, in his mind, that tells him, hey, I can do this, I can have this guy, and he's going to try and do it into Lodge Corner. Can't quite get up the inside there into the final turn, and it's one of the better overtaking opportunities. They're both squirrely on the exit of the corner, over the hill, and in fact, the pit lane window is now open, I beg your pardon. So into the pits comes Lewis Proctor. Sensible decision that. I think he was starting to come under pressure, starting to drive defensively, starting to make some mistakes. Better to get him in, get him out of the car, and reset for the second stint.
Yeah, exactly. Even though he had track position, if Witt started to get on the front foot, they would have both lost time. So I think they've done that strategy in terms of just to get to the end of the race as quickly as possible. And funnily enough, that's the best strategy normally. So the pit lane looks relatively busy. We've got Seal, we've got Neary in, as well as Dahan. So there's a few tyre changes going on as well. So there's a minimum pit stop time that they have to be stopped for, which means they've got about 45 seconds of stationary action in the pit lane. So there are time to do tyres, and you're not losing time to the guys who decide to stay on the original set. And you will see these cars in at 45 degrees. And then they're allowed 4 mechanics to push that car back, and then the car must leave straight away, because essentially they start blocking the pit lane with their pushback. So this is Witt now. He's just made quite a big mistake there, smashing that curb on the right-hand side. He needs to be banging lap after lap after lap now to try and do the undercut on the Optimum 96 car, which has left the pit lane and all looked relatively clean as we see the 2 Mercedes. So that'll be interesting. Kajada silver rated against Jelmer Berman, probably one of Mercedes' fastest GT3 drivers in that car he shares with Loggy. So this is going to be interesting. We see the Barwell car just getting around the back of the area. It's all very tight. So we've got to do another lap or so until we see when he boxes, and looks like he's carrying on for another lap. So this isn't official track position, as we see quite an unusual waving motion there. So I would say there's a radio issue. Normally the pit is a very easy communication. It's box, box, copy box, and you come in your pit lane on your merry way. But if they're waving that board so frantically, I would suggest there is an issue, as we see the other 2 McLarens in. World's fastest gamer, James Baldwin, getting out. Mikey O'Brien stepping up to GT3 as well, getting in now. You can see there's slightly different opinions on 45 degrees there. There's no real advantage, but maybe they need to go back to school and get their protractors out and learn what that is.
Good first stint, that, Baldwin. I think he started 4th and stayed there, but no mistakes, and he kept the pressure on the 2C's car in front throughout, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely brilliant from someone who's real-life racing to going on to sim and seeing how different it is and how often I have to hit the reset button in a sim race with everyone shouting at me and threatening to get me banned from the community and all that. He hasn't put a foot wrong, so I think he will be very happy. So this will be the interesting one. I expect the Optimum car to easily clear the 2C's car and this one now, the RJN one, because that gap was about 4.5 seconds. So that all stays the same. It's when the next 2C's car, the number 10 car, boxes, that it will be particularly interesting and tight, I think.
Significantly changing the pit lane there, because RJN have got their car out ahead of 2C's Motorsport. So James Baldwin has been in and handed over to Michael O'Brien, and O'Brien came out ahead of the number 9 car, now being driven by Dean McDonald. So that is a change for 3rd position. This is for 3rd place still in GT4. Remember, the GT4 pit window is later than the GT3s. That will open in another 2 minutes, so these drivers have at least 1 more lap to do, maybe 2, before they can come into the pit lane. Finally, in now comes the race leader. So Jordan Witt then in the number 10 car, ready to hand over to Jack Mitchell. Out gets Jordan, Jack assisting him as much as he can there with the driver change. And this is critical. He's had 2 extra laps in completely clean air compared to this car, the Orange Machine number 96 of Ollie Wilkinson. Wilkinson also now in traffic. So in the next 30 seconds or so, we'll see who's got the lead, and this is not working out at all well here. He's got stuck behind and still can't really get past the 33 BMW of David Whitmore, the All-Am entry in GT4, remember. All of this time lost and the fact that the 2C's car had that clean air, might that just be enough to allow Optimum through into the race lead? We'll find out shortly, because he's heading into Lodge Corner. The number 10 car is back on its way though, so this is going to be very tight. It's quite a long way down the pit lane. Out of Lodge Corner comes Wilkinson. He's got the Balf Motorsport car of Mia Fluid to put a lap on. There goes the 2C's car. This is going to be very, 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 very tight. Off it goes. It's got the tighter line, but it's got to get up to speed in the pit lane exit. It gets out just in front, but remember, the Optimum car, that driver is up to speed. He's had a couple of laps already. Ollie Wilkinson has full temperature and pressure back in the tyres. Now is the time to attack, but actually, not quite close enough.
Yeah, the 2C's car has also gone for new tyres, so Mitchell has a brand new set of Pirellis on, which for the first few laps is probably half a second to a second faster, so he is going to get that. The only thing I would add is that the 2C's going down the pit lane, the number 10 car, was very slow at the end, which normally indicates he is close to his pit lane time. So the car will have a timer in with a delta saying if you're below or above. And obviously if you're below and you're going to get a penalty, you need to ease off. So if he's not eased off enough and he's gone under the time, he will get a stop-go penalty for the amount of time he was under, which isn't the problem, but the coming in and out of the pit lane is going to be 15, 16 seconds.
So Jack Mitchell into the lead of the race then. They successfully executed the undercut. They get themselves ahead of Optimum Motorsport, who had led the entire race up until that point from pole position. And now that is the battle you're watching. The green Lamborghini in front of them is almost a lap down, so you can kind of discard that one from the situation. That's the JMH Auto car of John Seal and now Marcus Clutton on board. The trouble is, Marcus Clutton is a race instructor here at Oulton Park. He knows this place like the back of his hand, and he was 5th quickest in the pro session yesterday, so he's every bit as quick as the drivers around. In fact, he might have the pace to pull away from those cars over the remainder of his stint. Into the pit lane come the GT4 cars now then, so this is the second of our pit stop windows. There is a 4 or 5 minute overlap between the GT3 and the GT4 windows, but all of the GT3 cars are pitted, and so the GT4 teams have the pit lane to themselves. Jamie Caroline there jumping on board the 97 Aston Martin that was started by Daniel Vaughan. Jamie Caroline, former British Formula 4 champion, Ginetta Junior star as well, and now turning his attention to GT racing. 21 is in Mia Fluid to hand over to Ewan Hankey, who went quickest in his qualifying session. That's the car that will start at the front for race 2 in GT4. And the pit stops begin then for the GT4 car. They've got a slightly longer minimum pit stop time as well, so this is all a little bit less frenetic than it was for the GT3 teams.
Yeah, and the Silvers actually have a 14-second extra pit stop over the Pro-Am and Am cars in GT4, so even longer for them. Whereas in GT3, the pit stop time is the same, it is just the weight penalty that they carry. So that Toyota looking beautiful over the rolling hills of Cheshire, and I'm sure they're going to be super happy with that. And I generally think that car's going to be in contention for race wins as the season goes on, which is brilliant to get a new car in and up to speed so quickly. It doesn't always happen that well for a new project like that.
Well, they're certainly in contention for a podium here. They're running second, and they have not yet pitted, nor has the 95 car actually, so the top 2 in GT4 staying out. Jordan Albert's also stayed out in the Academy Mustangs. There's a bit more of a split of strategies here in GT4, whereas in GT3 everyone came in within the first lap or so. Here a few of the teams willing to wait a bit longer. So back out into the race then goes car number 58, and that is Jordan Collard now. So we've got 2 Collards in the race, one in GT3 and one in GT4. Jordan has retained that position then over Jamie Caroline's 97 Aston Martin. There is Jamie's teammate, car number 95, Conor O'Brien, leading the way by 8.7 seconds over Sam Smelt, former British touring car star. Had a half a season at least in BTCC a couple of years ago. And Sam Smelt, as impressive as the debut has been so far for that Toyota, it cannot live with the pace of the very well sorted and well developed Aston Martin from TF Sport. But there is the Speedworks run car. Speedworks themselves, of course, a factory affiliated team these days in touring car racing. And they've got quite a close bond going now with Toyota. It makes sense, therefore, that they will bring the Supra GT4 into British GT. On board with Smelt then, so what do we think? Does he pit this time? There definitely isn't such a rush here in GT4 to get these cars in straight away.
Yeah, he can do another lap with the window he's got available, so he might carry on, as we see O'Brien carrying on. So the team are probably making the call out of which driver they think's quicker, which one's in a bit more of the rhythm. So TF obviously think Connor's doing a mega job, which on the face of it is, and the same with Smelt. He stays out for another lap, and this is like what I said earlier, this is the foundations of the stint. So although it doesn't look like they're doing anything because they're not overtaking people and they're not gaining or losing on cars they can see, this is all time as we see Albert box there finally. So it'll be interesting to see where he comes out, because obviously we saw the other TF car and Matthias in McLaren come in and they left together, whereas Albert's done a couple more laps. As we see a change in lead. Didn't see that on TV, obviously. I'll let you bid out, Andy.
Yeah, Michael O'Brien is into second place now then in the RJN McLaren. So change for second there. Ollie Wilkinson falling backwards in the optimal car. This was always going to be the lively stint, wasn't it? Because you've got those Silver Cup cars that had the advantage after the first half of the race, and now the pros are in the Pro-Am cars, and they're starting to make progress as well. Although at the moment, actually, most of the battling going on between the silver-graded drivers. We just had that change for second place, and there is a stop-go penalty for the race-leading car. Jack Mitchell, Joe, you picked up on that coming out of the pit lane. A 10-second stop-go penalty for a pit stop infringement. That has to be the minimum pit stop time, surely.
I hate being right all the time. It's a curse. I was born with it, I promise. But that is gutting for them. Absolutely gutting, because you can see the gap they've got is huge. So on the last lap, Ollie must have had a bit of a problem, because he actually lost 7 seconds. So it wasn't O'Brien being quicker, it was that car losing time. And it looks okay now, so it might have been a bit GT4 traffic or whatever. But yeah, for that 2Cs car of Mitchell, that's going to be gutting, try and do some quick maths to see where they're going to pop out. But it's going to be outside the top 10, I think, to be honest.
Yeah, well, they're 8.1. Oh, that is Ewan Hankey on his outlap, I think, going off at Drews. That's not a very Ewan Hankey-like moment, is it? No. He saves the car, very lucky to avoid the barriers there. There was a GT3, I think that was the Bentley, wasn't it, involved? Could he have been offline trying to get out of the way?
Yeah, it could have even been contact of it. That looked more like his teammates' driving skills. Mia flew at the Scandinavian flick. I've been ice driving with Mia, and her car control's brilliant, and luckily Ewan's was pretty top draw there to save that from going in the barrier. So, yeah, that's going to delay his progress, obviously, being the pro on there. As we see Caroline down the inside of Collard into turn 1, I think pick that up coming out of here. So it really is kicking off now. It's hard to follow everything exactly that's going on.
Well, yeah, indeed. In GT4 alone there, that was side by side for third place, essentially, and that was the HHC McLaren just about hanging on to that then. So that is 58 staying ahead of the Academy car, which now is being driven in the second stint by Matt Cowley, former Northern Formula Ford 1600 ace was Matt Cowley, and still does quite a bit of Formula Ford racing actually, so he wasn't able to get ahead. But behind, I think there might have been a change there. As you said, Jamie Caroline was attacking Jordan Collard for what will become 5th position in the GT4 category. This is the fight for third in GT3, but it will become the fight for second when the leader comes in to serve this pit stop penalty. He's 8.3 seconds ahead at the moment, Jack Mitchell, but of course it's not just a 10-second penalty, he's got to get in and out of the pit lane as well. So yeah, he's going to drop right down towards the midfield there, and that will promote everybody behind him up a position. So on your screen then, the orange McLaren of Michael O'Brien for Optimum Motorsport. The blue and black is, change there, isn't it? Yeah, so Wilkinson behind, and then McDonald in 4th position, with Sandy Mitchell catching as well. As finally into the pit lane comes the 95 TS4 Aston Martin. So Conor O'Brien got his money's worth in that stint. He stayed out until right towards the end of the pit lane window. The same is true of Speedworks, who have just brought their Toyota in as well, and that should now complete the rest of the stops. So we will give you the proper order in a moment or two, but it is going to work out that on their debut in the championship, the Jenson Team Rocket squad with RJN are going to lead the race with Michael O'Brien. On board now with Patrick Kigala then, he's in 6th position. He is the last of the Silver Cup cars in GT3, and he's got Jelmer Berman in another Mercedes, but he is very much a pro driver, bearing down on him. And this is going to be the first of those battles as the Pro-Am cars trying to get themselves back into contention. And you know what? Now that Mitchell's going to have to come in for this pit stop penalty, the Pro-Am cars are not going to be that far off the race lead.
No, really not. And we see the fastest lap of the race, Matt Griffin as well, so a car behind that. So this is going to get really, really tasty. Because by the looks of it, it almost looks like everyone's in the wrong order pace-wise, and it's bunching up. I think we've got O'Brien at the front, Wilkinson a little bit behind him, but I think that could get closed up again on that gap. And then I think you can get Phil Keane in on there as well, potentially by the end of the race. He's 9 seconds down the road, but Phil is so quick round here. So giving him a sort of another 12 laps, I put some money on him being in this battle. So it's then down to who can overtake, and it's working out which cars are strong where. And it does seem at the moment like the McLaren is very good on this brake, so by that nature it makes it hard to overtake. But yeah, I think Jelmer Berman and Kajala, they're nice feisty Europeans. They'll definitely be up for a bit of a battle.
95 back into the race then, so that is Conor O'Brien back into the lead of GT4 as well. And I think the Speedworks car came back out in 2nd. Yes, it did, so no change in GT4. Now, here's a question then. Jack Mitchell's got this penalty, but remember, we think there's a radio issue there, don't we? Because he didn't come in for his pit stop at the time that we expected him to. He did an extra couple of laps. They were waving furious at him from, well, not Jack Mitchell, but at the first driver, Jordan Witt, to come into the pit lane. Now, if the radio's not working and Jack Mitchell isn't automatically looking at the pit wall, because he won't be expecting a penalty necessarily, could we be in a position here where he genuinely doesn't know that he has to come in to serve it? Yeah,
it's a really good point, actually. Really, I hadn't thought about it myself. We see GT4 coming to pit, sorry, Ewan Hankey, so let's have a problem. So yeah, if he doesn't serve his penalty within the 3 laps of it being given, it will then turn into a black flag, which is game over, you're out of the race sort of thing, and that would be super unfortunate. But yeah, as a driver, if you're not used to it, Obviously, he knew there was a radio issue before he got in the car, so maybe he's given a glance to the pit wall every now and again. But yeah, the old pit board's become a bit of a redundant relic of motorsport. We don't really use it for anything apart from when there's an issue, and I never have an issue because I'm always all right.
It goes without saying, Joe. Ewan Hankey's radio is working fine because he's just been in to serve his own 10-second track limits penalty. That's what that pit lane visit was. And there, Jack Mitchell is in. So Jack Mitchell then from the race lead, making very much an unscheduled stop into the pit lane. Now, where's this going to bring him out? Behind Phil Keane, possibly behind Sam Neary and Matt Griffin as well. Yes, it will. The Mercedes and the Ferrari will go through. That's going to drop him down to 10th position, and that is hard to take. Leading the race by nearly 9 seconds. To all intents and purposes, had it in the bag, and now not only are they not going to win it, they're probably not going to be on the podium. They may struggle to improve much upon 10th position. So some real drama then here midway through the race. That means this is your lead pack. So in the lead of the race now, Michael O'Brien then in the number 2 car for Jenson Team Rocket RJN. There he goes, the white, black and yellow car. Second place then is Ollie Wilkinson for Optimum. Third place for 2Cs is Dean McDonald. Fourth place, Sandy Mitchell for Barwell. Fifth place is Patrick Kuyala in the Mercedes, and then Jelmer Berman, the first of the pro drivers, will be into 6th position now, and he is just about to come into shot, I thought, actually, in the green Mercedes. He was only 7/10 behind Kuyala at the start of the lap. He's dropped back this time, possibly in traffic, but there is Jelmer Berman in the green and black number 6 Mercedes. So what we've essentially got then is the top 6 cars covered by around about 4 seconds, with the quickest of those cars being the one at the back of the queue, and still 20 minutes of racing to go.
Yeah, and I think what Jelmer will be doing now in this number 6 Mercedes is trying to work out already where he can plot his move, if he can spot in the distance where he is particularly quicker into a corner and going there. The problem here, unfortunately, for a bit of excitement and overtaking, it is so narrow. So when you're the driver in front, it is quite easy to place your car in a position where it just means that if an overtake's going to happen, it's only going to happen because of contact, and hopefully everyone's too clean for that. But mistakes happen when you're under pressure. You obviously can run wide, and that leaves the door open for that car behind, as we see pretty much that happen at Shell Oil. And if Sandy Mitchell was maybe a car length closer, he could have stuck his nose there and put it in a compromising position.
Indeed, what you do get quite a lot here at Oulton Park is these big packs of cars, because if you do get a situation where the car at the front of the queue is not as quick as those behind, it's hard for them to get past, but they're still getting held up, and you just bottle up and you get these huge groups of cars almost tripping over each other, and that in itself produces lots of excitement. And as I make the point, we still have just under a third of this race to go, so anything could happen. The lead gap for O'Brien back to Wilkinson is 1.7 seconds, though. There is Michael O'Brien, so he's getting away because Wilkinson is defending so busily from McDonald and Mitchell behind, and so for the time being at least, this particular McLaren doesn't have any real defending to do. But you can see it's not an enormous gap back to 2nd, 3rd, 4th, then a small gap back to Kuyala in 5th, and then a slightly bigger gap back to Jelmer Berman, who can't keep up here, Joe, with Kuyala. What's going on there? You'd have bet your house on Jelmer Berman being the fastest car on track. He's not even as quick as the silver drivers in front of him. Yeah, I think Kuyala's very, very quick, massively talented, a bit of a hooky silver without throwing him under the bus the way the ratings work. But considering he's got an extra 40 kilos on board, he's doing mega, and we don't quite know the strategy. Maybe they took tyres in the pit stop. I didn't see that, so there could be that. But I think it just shows how well the Mercedes is going on that. And I think people are going, well, Mike O'Brien, it's easy to forget this is his first time in the GT3 car. So it's a relatively late deal. That car should have been racing in Europe, but with everything going on, changed to British GT, which gave Mikey his opportunity. So hopefully it shows you what a great car that McLaren is and how drivable it is. And he's just got on with the job and he's cracked on really well. You're fond of these McLarens, aren't you, Joe?
Don't know why. I'm not biased.
Well, they're going rather well. They aren't 1, 2, 3, 4 anymore, but they are locking out the podium places for the time being. But as you said, Sandy Mitchell in that black and white Barwell Motorsport Lamborghini is looking threatening. So too is Sam Dahan, who last year was at the wheel of a Baldwin Motorsport Lamborghini. There was a mistake there, I think, for Dean McDonald. He ran wide coming out of Knickerbrook corner, and Sandy Mitchell is all over him. Sandy really wants to get through here. You can see other cars are arriving on his tail, and I think that he believes he's a bit quicker than the 2Cs Motorsport McLaren in front. But that opportunity didn't quite work, and now it's sort of settling back down into a kind of rhythm. That's what you've got to do, though. If you're Sandy Mitchell here, Joe, the slightest mistake from McDonald, you have to pounce, because that could be your last chance. Yeah,
and it's just forcing the issue, so that it sounds obvious, but the closer you are, the more stress that is putting on the driver in front, as we see Mitchell bouncing all over those curbs there. And that just forces that issue home even more. So I haven't quite seen the arrogant headlight flash just yet, but I'm sure that button will be activated, which automatically flashes the headlights 3 times. And the idea behind that, as we see Wilkinson doing it to GT4, and it's just basically doing a bit more pressures. I think we'll be able to get a bit more information, hopefully, from Kelvin. Who have you got down there, Twinkle Toes?
Thank you, Joe. I'm here with John. John, that was a mega stint from you. It looked towards the end of your stint, you was getting Lewis in front of you and the other McLaren, and then fate struck. What happened?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's just been a pit stop infringement somewhere along the line, but from my personal point of view, the first stint was good. I started to catch Lewis again as soon as we hit traffic. I think, you know, me having more experience has helped there, you know, being able to cut through and catch up with him. So yeah, felt like a good stint. It was good to get the boys, you know. Everyone was excited. I think we're going to get the first win in the first outing, but, you know, we'll just have to wait for the next race.
Thanks, mate. Back to you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Kelvin. So what we don't know is what that was for, because typically if it's for a pit stop being under the minimum time, say it's 3 seconds too short, you get a 3-second penalty. I can't imagine they were 10 seconds out. That's quite a miscalculation, even for a new team as they are. That still would surprise me. So we'll get to the bottom of it. We'll try and find out before the second race later on. But for now, we are focusing very much on the racing on track. 3rd, 4th and 5th places flash past our commentary position, absolutely nose to tail. And now Yelmer Berman is starting to join in as well. So it's almost a 4-car pack now, fighting over the 3rd position. Dean McDonald is defending well for the time being, but Joe, we've seen a couple of little mistakes, and the deeper into this stint we get, especially considering the extra weight that he's carrying, there's every chance we could see more. Yeah, definitely, and Sandy's got a lot of experience in the Lamborghini, so he will understand how that degradation in the tyre works, where this is Dean McDonald's first GT3 race. So again, it's all that knowledge of knowing when to push, how to push. You've got a lot of driver aids in the car, and the biggest one in terms of looking after the tyres is traction control, which I know in our car, the McLaren has 12 settings, so you can choose exactly how much you want the rear of the car to slide. The more you turn it up, the more it looks after the tyre, but the slower you go. So I always run it on 1 because I'd rather be as fast as I can and have no tyres at the end of the race. But there is probably a bit more strategy if you've got a few brain cells to work out exactly what you need. But yeah, I think Sandy has probably got the upper hand in that in terms of just the overall knowledge of it, but he's still got to get that move done. I think it's 50-50 in my mind whether it's going to happen or not, to be honest. The nature of the circuit means it's less likely, but then I think the pace deficit between the two is giving it a good opportunity there. As we see the Toyota pitting, I don't know if you spotted why on that front, Andy. It didn't stop, so I'm guessing it was a penalty, but I have to say I didn't see on the timing screen, but that is drama because that car was running 2nd in GT4. I'm not sure where it came out, but there's every chance it's lost that potential podium debut. We'll see where it ends up at the end of this lap, and we'll try and find out exactly why it was in. My guess is maybe a track limits penalty, but we shall find out if we can. So in and out of the pit lane then came the Toyota of James Kell. A couple of other drivers flirting with track limits penalties here. That was Sam Dahan running a bit wide coming out of Cascade. On the left-hand side of your screen, by the way, the new graphics that we've got for you this year that denote, that just disappeared typically when I started talking about them, that denote the difference between the Silver Cup entries and the Pro-Ams. The Pro-Ams have, in GT3 at least, white background with gold numbering and the white background with the black numbers. They are your Silver Cup entrants. So you can see the silver cars have managed to hold their own here so far, possibly just because that track position is so important. Hello, another stop-go penalty. Car 10, 18 10-second stop-go penalty now for the car that was leading earlier on. Jack Mitchell will be spitting feathers inside that 2Cs Motorsport McLaren. They've already served one stop-go for a pit lane infringement, and presumably, Joe, during that penalty, a bit of red mist descended and he sped in the pit lane.
Yeah, it's like double jeopardy, isn't it? He wouldn't have had that drive-through if it wasn't for the first drive-through, and it's fully unravelled now. I think he's clutching at straws to get a result from this, and it's going to be for those boys just regroup for the next race, which luckily for them is this afternoon. It's not in 2 weeks' time. That's the worst, when you leave the track with a bad result. It leaves a real bitter taste in your mouth. We see Sandy right under the rear wing here into turn one. It's just not a very big brake zone, turn one. It shows the speed of the cars. They'll be fifth down to fourth gear, probably only losing about 40 miles an hour, so it's hard to make a move done there. Interesting as well, you can see Wilkinson's really now pulled away from this battle. Him and O'Brien are pretty similar on pace, so yeah, we see Kajala running wide. I don't think that's flirting, I think that's heavy petting, and as a driver you've got 3 warnings, so yeah, car 10, deja vu unfortunately, but 18 seconds rather than 10, and that's lonely. So 18 seconds, that would be in a correlation to the amount of speed he was over. So for it to be 18, I would suggest that was a rather large figure. 50 kilometres an hour is the limit here, and always for British GT, and that's controlled in the cars by a button which then automatically holds the car at that limit. So you can only really make a mistake if you come in too fast, or if you forget to press the button, really. And the GT4 Toyota getting in the middle of this pack, Kajana having to guess where to go, trying not to hit that tyre stack, and that's most probably lost him a second now, and he's got to do all that work all over again.
The Toyota, incidentally, has come out in 5th position, so they have lost quite a few places there. They were running second in GT4, but after that pit stop penalty that they've had to serve, they're back behind the Cowley-Caroline battle, which this pack is about to put a lap on, and that's the fight for 3rd place. Matt Cowley in the Academy Motorsport Mustang, and Jamie Caroline in the TF Sport Aston Martin, 3rd and 4th in GT4, and then next in line James Kell in the Toyota. Through we go then. 30 laps have been completed. We've got just over 10 minutes still to go in round number 1 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. Michael O'Brien has a 1.7 second cushion over Ollie Wilkinson in their pair of McLarens out in front. The real battle is the one going on for 3rd. That's what we're focusing on now. Dean McDonald, Sandy Mitchell, Patrick Kujala and Yelmer Berman. And Kujala again there running wide out of Cascades Corner. I haven't seen any warnings for him though, so maybe, oh no, that's off goes Matt Cowley. Interrupt myself there from a 3rd position in GT4. That's a real shame for Academy Motorsport. They were on for a good result, and it benefits James Kell, who gets himself back up 1 position now. The Mustang though has gone grass tracking, and well, Joe, that's an easy mistake to make, and actually usually more costly than that, because that barrier tends to come up quite quickly. Yeah, luckily the grass is dry up here, so it stopped him pretty quickly, but you can see how far he went, and that gives you an appreciation of the speed exactly they've got there. Hopefully he can get going again, one for his own sake and get back into the race, but otherwise that would most probably have to be a safety car to recover that car, which would definitely spice things up. So fingers crossed, maybe there is one. Well, indeed, although we only have 9 minutes left on the clock. The race has flown by, and so a safety car now would take us quite close to the end of the race. And actually, things are hotting up quite nicely all on their own, aren't they? Because Sandy Mitchell has dropped back again now from Dean McDonald into the clutches of Kujala behind. And we're on board now with the Mercedes that was started by Sam Tahan. But that Patrick has now taken over, climbs over Deer Leap in towards turn number 1. There's some traffic in front of them. That's the 58 HHC McLaren of Jordan Collard running 2nd in GT4, and they're going to catch him down towards Cascades.
And there's a yellow flag out there. So safety car.
Oh dear, well, you were right again, Joe. That's twice today. You're on a roll. Out comes the safety car, and well, there are winners and losers anytime the safety car comes out. The big loser, really, Michael O'Brien, because you mentioned it a lap or so ago. He was matching Ollie Wilkinson pretty much 10th for 10th. The gap was sat at about 1.7, 1.8 seconds. It will now be absolutely nothing, and he's going to have some defensive work to do as and when the race gets back underway. So the safety car out for the first time this season then, because of Academy Motorsport's Ford Mustang that's had a spin up at Island Bend. It can't get going. In a dangerous position, so the safety car has been called. This though gives us an opportunity to hand back down to the pit lane, because Kelvin Fletcher, I believe, is down at Speedworks and might be able to shed some light on that pit stop penalty.
Yes, I'm here with Mick, team manager at Speedworks. A great qualifying session, great race, great stint, and then you had an infringement and a bit penalty.
Yeah, so we've had a drive stop-go penalty for just being 0.3 of a second under the pit stop time. So yeah, the driver probably could have backed off a little bit on the way out, but he didn't want to slam on the brake, so we've kind of been a bit close to the margin there.
I like it. You blame the driver.
Well, he'll have an excuse. I dare say he'll have an excuse in the book somewhere, but yeah, I think we did our bit. We were just a bit close to the wind, I think, trying to gain a bit of time.
Excellent, thank you. Back to you guys.
Well, this safety car, Joe, plays into their hands because James Kell, obviously, he gained 4th because the Mustang went off, and he was 10 seconds behind Jamie Caroline in 3rd. Another gap that will now shrink because of the safety car. The downside is he's only going to have a lap or so after the safety car comes back in which to do something about it.
Yeah, just sorry, watching the replay on that, it looked like he was probably just looking in his mirror at Wilkinson coming, and then by the time he looked back up, it was too late. And obviously the grass has quite a lot less adhesion than tarmac, so there was only one way it was going. Odd that he couldn't get going again. Sometimes these cars now are so complex, the wheel speed sensors and all the other sensors, when they go backwards, when it's in reverse, while going at speed, it confuses everything, and the computer says no, and that's it. It needs the laptop plugged in. My fear here is that it's in a bit of a random place. Doesn't look like there's a JCB or anything particularly near it, and we only have 6 minutes remaining. So to get that cleared and back to green might be a bit of an ask. So it would be a real shame to finish the race effectively under a safety car and lose that battle that you're talking about there.
Yeah, the protocol here, there are a couple of flatbed trucks that are parked down on the outside of Cascades, and they tend to drive up there and pick any cars up that deposit themselves in a barrier or a gravel trap up at that part of the track, and that whole process can take normally about 3 safety car laps. Well, this is the 2nd safety car lap, if you like, so hopefully one more and we'll be good to go. But that's on a good day. That's if the car doesn't get stuck, or if they can find a quick gap in traffic to get the truck up there in the first place. Sometimes it can take a bit longer, and because we're so deep into the race, the field had spread out and we're filling almost the entire track, so they've got to wait till everyone's behind the safety car queue before they can even think about sending recovery vehicles back out on track. We do have 5 minutes left though, so hopefully we'll get at least a lap or so of racing back in before the checkered flag comes out. It would be a shame if this first race of the season ended behind the safety car. It would work out quite nicely though for Michael O'Brien, because he, I'm sure, is looking in his mirrors now at Ollie Wilkinson behind and thinking, I really could do without having to defend from you for another 2 or 3 laps. He'd be quite happy if this went the distance behind the safety car. Wilkinson in 2nd. They'll be a bit frustrated with the way this race has gone, but actually a podium at the start of the year wouldn't be a bad way to start. And Dean McDonald in 3rd place likewise. He was coming under increasing pressure from Sandy Mitchell in the Barwell Lamborghini in 4th. Kiyala is 5th in the Ram Racing Mercedes, and Jan Berman, his teammate, right behind him in 6th. 7th for Phil Keane. Slightly anonymous in this race so far, Phil Keane, although he was some way behind the lead pack when he took over from Adam Ballon. 8th position for Sam Neary, who again is doing a good job in his father's Mercedes. He's sharing that car with his father this year as well. Matt Griffin is 9th, and Scott Mulvin 10th in the Bentley, and again we haven't seen that much of in this race. Dennis Lind also hasn't made the progress I thought he might have done. He's 11th, and then in 12th position is Jack Mitchell, who will gain all of the time that he's lost from his 2 penalties, but he won't gain back the track position that it cost him. That car running in 12th ahead of Marcus Clutton 13th. In 14th, the first of the GT4 cars, that's Patrick Kibble in the bright yellow Aston Martin for TF Sport. 2nd place Jordan Collard for HHC, and 3rd for Jamie Caroline in the 2nd TF car. 4th in GT4 is James Kell, and Gus Bowers in the 57 car, so that's the other HHC McLaren rounding out the top 5. 3 minutes to go then, Joe, and what are we thinking? Are we going to get this race back underway? Well, answer that question in a moment, because actually we're going to head down to Kelvin Fletcher, who I think I heard is in the Academy Motorsport garage.
Matt, new car for you this year, obviously away from the Aston into the Ford, but the round 1 hasn't quite gone to plan.
It was going really well. I think we had 6 GT3s coming up behind us pretty quickly. I didn't really see what happened, and not heard on the radio as yet, but it would appear maybe it got run wide. But we'll have to wait and see. But the car is undamaged, I think. Wouldn't restart for some reason. But no, it was a strong showing. The boys did a really good job. Jordan ran really well in the first stint. Matt was doing a good job. We were running P3. So I think we were just going to try and bring it home. We had the Aston on our back, but I think we had them covered. So bit of a shame, but we've got another one this afternoon, so we'll make up for it.
Excellent. Thank you, mate. Back to you guys.
Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Kelvin. Well, that is a real shame for Academy Motorsport. It's always tricky, that, isn't it, when you have a change of car, not only for the drivers, but for the team as well. Each car requires a slightly different setup and a slightly different way of working around it, and they've done a really good job to get onto terms with this Ford Mustang, who was in a podium place. A shame that they're not even going to finish the race now.
Yeah, I just hope they can get the car repaired for the second race. Doesn't look like there's any major damage on it, so like I said, hopefully it's just a software issue and it just needs a laptop plugged in.
Green flag. The safety car snuck in without us realising, so I think they're going to leave the car where it is, which is interesting, but the race will resume and they'll have time maybe for 2 more laps. Yes, they should have 2 more laps to go, so that caught us off guard because we just seen the Ford Mustang still on the grass, but they've clearly decided it's in a safe enough position and the race can carry on. So a 2-lap dash for the cash.
Red flag. On a marshal board I can see a red flag, but still green everywhere, sorry.
No, that's all right. Red flag, it would have made some sense maybe, but anyway, no, we are still green. The race is continuing, and that means these battles for podium positions can continue, although Michael O'Brien, he was on his toes. He didn't get caught out by the safety car coming in because he has already built up a nice little cushion. That's probably about a second or so between himself and Wilkinson, who instead is having to watch his mirrors to keep McDonald and Mitchell at bay.
Yeah, I think Mikey was mega on that. He's got the jump and he's almost reinstalled the gap that he had before. And Sandy's done a really good job in that Lamborghini because he had the GT4 McLaren between him and McDonald. And obviously there's not McLaren GT4 gap there. So that's how much he's closed up on this lap. And there is going to be this final lap that we're about to go on to see if anyone can to make any moves. And it kind of actually looks like it's evened itself back out again. There's no one closer or further away than they were before the safety car, unfortunately.
Yes, well, possibly because they were all so close together anyway. But yeah, you're right. This looks almost exactly the same as it was about 10 or 15 minutes ago. But yeah, the final lap then will now begin. And Michael O'Brien looks good for the race victory here in the McLaren. But which McLaren is going to finish in second position? That might be the real question. These 3 McLarens, remember, all run out of 3 different teams, all Silver Cup entrants, and they all want to try and finish as high up the order as they can in this first race. Worth remembering, though, that the podium finishers in both classes for this race will have to spend extra time in the pit lane in race 2, so maybe that might come into play as well here. If you were Dean McDonald sat in 3rd place, how big a risk are you willing to take here to take 2nd place away from Wilkinson, knowing that A, it could go horribly wrong anyway, and B, even if it does, you're gaining relatively few points but several seconds onto your pit stop in race 2?
Yeah, mentality-wise, start of the season versus end of the season is very different. So, yeah, you need to be 100% sure that the move's nailed on, I think, in this instance. And just quite look like there's a big enough speed difference between the cars for that to happen. I think Kajala's done really well in this car pace-wise, and I think in race 2, with obviously the pros of doing their qualifying there, be starting near the front. We're going to see this in reverse, in effect, that the pros will be in front of the silver cars, and their job is then to get away. The interesting bit will then be the Amps trying to defend from the silvers, of which there will be a much, much bigger speed difference.
Yeah, those 2 Mercedes will share the second row, actually, for that second race behind the 2 Barwell Lamborghinis, so it's going to be a real changing of the guard at the front of the field. For now, though, it is McLaren's time to shine, and in particular, it is the time for Jenson Team Rocket RJN to start celebrating, because it is going to be a race victory in round number 1 of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. Across the line they go, and Michael O'Brien brings it home. James Baldwin wins the world's fastest gamer in his first ever race in the championship. Ollie Wilkinson brings the Optimum car home in 2nd, and Dean McDonald hangs on to 3rd. In GT4, it's going to be pretty plain sailing, I think, not for this TF Sport car, but for the other one. Number 95, Patrick Kibble, has crossed the line already, has he? No, hang on.
He's actually a lap ahead of the way the safety car works, so he just needs to finish this, so he was granted it.
Got you. I'm glad you're awake, Joe. So yes, through comes the 95 car. Patrick Kibble now does win the race, but you're right, because of the safety car there, it trapped everyone else a lap behind him. So a very easy final couple of laps there for Patrick Kibble. Jordan Collard 2nd for HHC, and Jamie Caroline 3rd. So both of the TF Sport Aston Martins are on the podium. But Joe, I really can't say enough positive things about this Jenson Team Rocket RJN squad. They were a late addition to the championship anyway, as you alluded to earlier on. Their plan was to race in Europe. That couldn't happen. Here they are in British GT, and they're straight on the pace. James Baldwin, super impressive there in his first stint in the championship, and Michael O'Brien did well to bring it home. They win the race then. Second place for Wilkinson and Proctor for Optimum. Angus Fender and Dean McDonald are third. 3 different McLarens from 3 different teams, all on the podium. Rob Collard and Sandy Mitchell come home fourth ahead of Patrick Kuyala and Sam Dahan in 5th. And then the first Pro-Am car of Yelmer Berman and Ian Loggy. Bit surprised they didn't make more progress there. Adam Ballon and Phil Keener second in Pro-Am, 7th overall, ahead of Sam Neary and Richard Neary, 3rd in Pro-Am, 8th place outright. Then it was Matt Griffin and Duncan Cameron for AF Corsa. Scott Malvern and Nick Jones in the Team Parker Racing Bentley rounding out the top 10. And then Michael Igoe and Dennis Lind ahead of Jack Mitchell and Jordan Witt after their 2 pit stop penalties, ending up in 12th for 2C's Motorsport. Marcus Clutton and John Steele in the JMH Auto Lamborghini rounds out the GT3 field. Then TF Sport victorious in GT4 ahead of HHC with the second of the TF Sport cars coming home in 3rd. Then it was Sam Smelt and James Kell, 4th place. Not a bad recovery after the pit stop penalty, but a case of what could have been there. They were running 2nd at the time. Chippy Westermail does well as well there with Gus Bowers to get into the top 5 for HHC. So into Parc Ferme then will go our British GT field, and Joe, an interesting first race there. We always knew it was going to be hard to overtake here at Oulton Park, but the competition is close. No one really ran away with that one. I know that 2Cs will feel that they would have dominated that race had they not had the penalties, but behind them, it was pretty much nose to tail from the start of the race to the checkered flag. Yeah, which I think is great for the championship, shows the balanced performance is close. I think although we got 3 McLarens on the podium, I think, as you said, all 3 different teams running it, and they've just got on top of the car and getting the most performance out of it. As we see Mikey getting out, he'll be happy. Absolutely mega. Mikey's a lovely, lovely guy, really kind-natured, especially for a driver, and got this awkward social distancing congratulations now, as times before we would have all been beating the head out of him for doing so well. Well, and how well he did, and that team, I mean, the car looks the part, doesn't it? And it's looked strong all weekend. And don't forget, that car could very easily have been on pole position for this race if James Baldwin hadn't gone a fraction over the edge of the curb on his flying lap. He actually went pole position briefly on his very last lap in the session before it was deleted for track limits. Across comes Ollie Wilkinson to congratulate him as well. And third place man, Dean McDonald in the 2C's Motorsport McLaren. But for race number 2 later on, those McLarens are going to be deep in the field. The highest placed McLaren on the grid for race 2 is the number 10 car, the one that had those penalties in this race, that will start 8th position. The number 2 car that won this race will start 10th position. And number 96, they will be, they're the highest placed McLaren. They are 6th on the grid though, so none of the McLarens will be on the front couple of rows for race 2, and they'll have some work to do to try and get themselves maybe into a race-winning position again. Ollie Wilkinson then wanders over to Galvin Fletcher, who is on standby to have a chat with our top 3 finishers in GT3, and hopefully we'll hear from some of our GT4 front runners as well. In GT4, Joe, a strong start there for TF Sport. I mean, we kind of knew they'd be on the pace, but they've got new driver lineups as well. And it wasn't guaranteed that they'd turn up here at Oulton Park and immediately be on the pace. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And TF, obviously, champions last year with Johnny Adam and Graham Davison in GT3, so massively capable. So highlights then of the first round of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship even, and it was a good start made by the Optimum Motorsport car that was started by Lewis Proctor. He led in the early going. Everyone was pretty gentlemanly actually with each other in the first half a lap or so. Nobody wanting to throw away their weekend on the very first lap. It's a 2-race day here as well, so any damage done in this race would put the teams under some real pressure to get the car back out again for race number 2. Adam Ballon was fighting his Baldwin Motorsport Lamborghini from deep in the field, and it never really was able to make a huge amount of progress. The real battle in the early stages was the one for 3rd place in GT4 as HHC, Academy Motorsport and TF Sport went toe-to-toe. door handle to door handle in their fight for a podium position. The TF Aston Martin and the Academy Mustang in particular trading positions almost by the lap. At the front of the field, the number 10 McLaren of Jordan Wick closed in on the race leader just as the pit lane window opened, but a radio issue meant that the number 10 car stayed out a couple of laps later. Everyone else dived into the pit lane, leaving Jordan Witt with some nice clear track, whilst Ewan Hankey on his outlap from the pit lane went off. He would later serve a pit stop penalty for a pit lane infringement as well, just to add insult to injury. Battling between TF Sport and HHC was a popular sight last year. It continued again at the start of 2020 with a bit of paint being traded. And then the big moment of the race, really, Academy Motorsport from a podium place in GT4 went off the road at Isle of Bend, bringing out a late safety car. On the restart, the field was bunched up, but then it had been beforehand, really. Pit stop penalties had taken the number 10 car out of the equation, and so it fell to the number 2 car for Jenson Team Rocket RJN to take the checkered flag in the first round of the championship. A McLaren 1, 2, 3, 3 different teams in the top 3, 5 different teams, in fact, in the top 5. Fantastic racing all round, though, in the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. And down in Parc Ferme, I believe we can now hear from our GT3 winners, now with Kelvin.
Quite a weird first podium.
Round one, race one, James from Gamer to the real thing. That was absolutely terrific. How did it feel?
I can't believe it. Like, first race winning, like, it wasn't on part of the script. When we got to the track on Friday, me and Michael, to be fair, we both have a lack of experience in GT3s. I think we said before we have a combined experience of 25 laps in the car. There's got to be some sort of record of the least experienced duo to ever go in British GT. But yeah, I didn't think when I came in we'd win the race, to be honest. We were 4th. But it's just like testament to patience is key in GT racing. Everyone kept on drilling it into me all weekend, and now I finally believe them. So yeah.
Well, Michael, you are inexperienced in GT3, but GT4 is obviously your stomping ground. Your steps up this year.
Yeah.
What a great way to say to your team boss, Jenson Button.
Yeah.
How's that for you, round one, race one?
Yeah, unbelievable, Kelvin, to be honest. I obviously had some great battles with you last year in the GT4 for the championship, and to get this relatively late call up to GT3, first of all, was incredible. And then obviously to represent Jenson and the team like that in the first race has been, well, couldn't believe it, to be honest.
Well,
I can't believe it.
Boys. I thought you did a great job today, and my old team as well, RJN, should I say. So great work today. Well done, guys.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. So there you have it, our GT3 winners, our Jenson Team Rocket RJN. And as Kelvin was saying, the team was founded by none other than Jenson Button himself, and I'm sure he'll be very, very happy to hear of their successes here in the sunshine at Oulton Park, which always produces some really close action for the season opener of the British GT Championship. Well, that was our GT3 race winning team. In GT4, it was the familiar sight, though, of a TF Sport Aston Martin on top, and down there with Kelvin Fletcher now are our GT4 winners.
Patrick, from Paul to the race win, that was a pretty good stint.
I was very happy with the second stint. I mean, kind of did a fantastic job to get that huge gap, so I just pretty much had the easy job of just putting the laps in and keeping clear of everyone else, really. And how was the Aston holding off in your stint there? Obviously the tyres were going off a little bit towards the end.
Yeah, it was going off, but TF gave us a really good car. I think it's more nervous being out of the car watching than it is in it.
Well done, guys.
Thank you. Cheers.
Great, guys.
Thank you, Calvin. Well, there you go then. Our first race of the Intelligent Money British GT Championship sees a brand new winner in the series. More of the same, hopefully, later on today. A completely different look to the grid, though. And it should be a cracking 60 minutes of racing. That one is due to start at about 4:45 local time. You don't want to miss it. The Intelligent Money British GT Championship off to a fantastic start. Already, we are looking forward to what the rest of the day, and indeed the rest of the season, has in store for us. Welcome to Oulton Park for the first event of the year in the Pro Tire Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge, an always exciting one-make series that already this weekend has put on quite a show. They had one race yesterday, two more races today though, and it's Josh Malin, one of the early championship favourites, who has the early advantage because he won yesterday's race with a last lap overtake round the outside at the corner just before the one that we're seeing here on James Taylor. And that was after a slightly tardy start, had seen Taylor lead the entirety of the race, some of it behind the safety car, only for Malin to pip him on the final lap. The grid for this one, though, has a slightly different look to it. It's based upon the second fastest lap times from qualifying. James Taylor has pole position this time, which he didn't yesterday, and it's Johnny Wilkinson that is alongside him. So Taylor and Wilkinson on the front row of the grid, with Josh Malin and Gordy Much on row number 2. Conor Garlick and Magnus Kruklevi are on row 3. Ashley Marshall and Jesse Chamberlain on the 4th row of the grid, which we'll rapidly try and get through here before the race gets underway. Then Charlie Budd and Dan Budd, the two brothers, sharing the 5th row. Well, that is probably all we will have time for, because I think the race is about to get underway now. The field is in position, and we have the second round of the Pro Tire Motorsport Ginetta GT5 Challenge about to get underway. Red lights go out, away they go. The rush towards Old Hall Corner begins. It's a good start made by Taylor. Malin gets away better this time as well, though. He's on the inside of Johnny Wilkinson into Old Hall Corner, and Josh Malin will go through. Yesterday's race winner, Gordy Much, there was on the outside line, trying to go into 4th, which he did, and manages to therefore fend off the fast-starting Conor Garlick, all safely through Old Hall Corner, down into Cascades, and Josh Malin already having a look at getting past James Taylor. He said to me after the race yesterday, Josh, that he believes